First, I'm very excited to be here on a panel with such other great peers. And I want to thank all of you for coming, and Frank and Center for Security Policy for inviting me to speak. I had some formal speech, which I guess I won't need. So I want to just talk to you first about the importance of free speech. When I first started this work, I'm a 9/11 survivor from New York. And when I first started, I was interested in Islamic terrorism. I wanted to know why they were trying to kill me and all my friends. But somewhere along the line, somebody mentioned at a meeting that if the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or the OIC, had its way, they would criminalize the entire conversation we were having. I thought that sounded kind of nutty, but instead of concluding that the person was wrong, I went back and started researching the OIC. I started looking at their UN resolutions and their speeches and their own documents, and I found that indeed the OIC was trying to criminalize all negative speech on Islam, even and perhaps especially when it's true. They wanted to criminalize, as it might have been alluded to in the prior panel, if they persecute Christians, other religious minorities, they persecute gays, they persecute women, they persecute, their criminal penalties are cruel and unusual. But if you question that or criticize it, then you are an Islamophobe. And in Muslim-majority countries, you are criminally responsible for that. And they don't have the kinds of jails that everyone here complains about. They're not getting their porn channel or their free, their little... Oops, sorry. Oh, my God. Wow. Did anyone hear what I was saying before? Yeah. Oh, okay. Anyway, the jails in Iran, for example, you go to Evin prison, people here, I think they just assume that prison somewhere else is like prison here. It's not. You get tortured, you get killed, you get flogged. In Saudi Arabia, you get, the penalties are beheading. This isn't something that's illegal. This is something that's mandated. It's institutionalized. The discrimination is institutionalized. So the speech is basically, you can't say anything bad about Islam or anything related to it. You can't talk about Islamic terrorism. You can't talk about Islamic persecution of religious minorities. And if you comment on any of these truths, then you're a bigot. You're a racist, you're an Islamophobe, and you're all kinds of really bad names. Anyway, people didn't really realize who the OIC was. It's the largest voting bloc in the UN, and astonishingly, most people don't know who it is. I hope that's starting to change now. 56 UN member states plus the Palestinian Authority. And they managed, starting in 1999 till 2010, every single year to get a UN resolution passed to combat defamation of Islam. They called it combat defamation of religions because when they first introduced it with their true intention, saying defamation of Islam, it didn't get the support, but they changed the title and the rest of the resolution remained the same. I'm not sure everyone knew what they were voting for, but it passed every single year. At some point, the West realized that when they say defamation, and we say defamation, it might not be the same thing. When they say it, it means you can't say something true. In America, truth is a defense, and you're allowed to have your opinion, and you're allowed to make true statements. So realizing that there were potential consequences for freedom of speech, the State Department, under then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, encouraged an alternative resolution. The resolution that was produced was Resolution 1618 to combat intolerance based on religion or belief. On its face, it sounded better than the prior resolutions. It didn't talk about defamation anymore, and there were many in the West, including Christian groups, Federalist Society, good places that supported the resolution because we thought it would retain free speech and just address the bigotry. I can't tell you what happened between March of 2011 and December of 2011, March when the resolution passed, and December when the State Department had its first conference on this resolution, but something changed in closed-door meetings, and they decided to focus totally on the West and Islamophobia, turned a blind eye to the real persecuted Christians, as Faith and others were talking about. So the whole focus about what religious intolerance was on the language that we used or the policies we had in the freest countries in the world, while Sudan and Pakistan and Nigeria and all those other countries where people are slaughtered, persecuted, jailed, were completely ignored. The implementation process for Resolution 1618, called the Istanbul Process, continues to this day. Every single year, the conference is held with countries and NGOs around the world to figure out how they can stop. It's other things too, but there's a huge emphasis on stopping Islamophobia through programs like dialogue and training people to disconnect the dots, basically. So, you know, remember after 9/11, everyone was criticizing our government for not connecting the dots. Well, now people have connected the dots, and there's a huge, huge effort to make sure you disconnect them. If you connect them, you're a bigot. Anyway, they'll use all kinds of politically correct language that has been successful in drawing in students from academia or people in interfaith dialogue to somehow join forces. So it is a red-green axis at this point. The Islamists cannot achieve their goals without the help of the left. Well, without the help of someone, and it's the left who seems to be willing to join in. So they'll talk about politically correct speech or responsible speech. You'll hear that a lot. Free speech has you have to be responsible. You have to be sensitive. You have to be, the true goal is to shut you up. And the other way they do it is by calling you names. If you say something that's true, it's hate speech. If you say something that, if you believe in border security, then you're a xenophobe, a bigot, an Islamophobe. So I want to stress to you that the important thing about language is not the words, it's the ideas that the words express, and that is what they're really trying to stop. They do not want to have a discussion about these very important policy issues. So instead of winning the debate on the merits of this isn't what I had planned, but instead of winning the debate on the merits of the issues, they will just call you names and then you'll have to shut up. That's what this is. So there are many Muslim Brotherhood front groups as well, Muslim Brotherhood front groups, who you can find them listed in the back of the 1991 explanatory memorandum that was entered into evidence in the largest terror financing trial in the history of the United States, entered into evidence against these groups with no objection from the defense. I think that's important. And these groups are doing the same thing, which is fighting defamation of Islam, only they do it at a local level in Canada and America using grassroots campaigns, and they put enormous pressure on corporations, authors, cartoonists, and politicians to get people to censor themselves in various ways. I wrote a whole book, by the way, on CARE censorship. CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, Muslim Students Association. Maybe some of these sound familiar to you. There are others as well. Under tremendous pressure from CARE, Nike, Liz Claiborne, Budweiser. I mean, there's so many corporations that you've heard of, that you do business with, that have changed their products, their package designs, even their own internal production procedures to be sensitive to Islam, sometimes hiring CARE to consult with to make sure they don't defame or offend their religion. So that's what's happening with the Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And I will say that in Europe, well, let's talk about Canada for a minute. Canada has a Charter of Rights and Freedom that purportedly guarantees freedom of expression for all Canadian citizens. However, you know, they don't have a First Amendment. We're so fortunate. They don't have it, and there's a little bit of wiggle room. And in recent history, year in and year out, Canadians have been fighting to keep the freedom that they are entitled to have. They had Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which was basically a hate speech law, It was interpreted disproportionately to apply to comments on Islam. It was subjectively interpreted. It was litigated in kangaroo courts of the human rights commissions, not in a real court, so they didn't have due process. It had an extraordinarily high conviction rate. Virtually until 2008, every single person prosecuted was convicted because they didn't really have a fighting chance from the beginning. In 2013, that law was repealed, but there have been numerous local efforts specifically targeting Islam to get laws passed that would allow authorities in different provinces to criminalize speech on Islam, even on Facebook. And just this past year, Motion 103, an anti-Islamophobia motion, passed in the Canadian Parliament. Nobody really knows what the word means, and that's on purpose, by the way, because when there were suggestions to replace that language with anti-Muslim bigotry, so we would be clear that we're talking about don't be bigoted toward people who are Muslim, as opposed to anti-Islam, which is an idea and you should be able to criticize any idea you want, that was rejected. So now they have an anti-Islamophobia motion. Nobody knows what it means, but it's pretty clear that you're forbidden to say Islam's not a religion of peace. And as I'm here today, they're still fighting for freedom on that issue. It's still an ongoing issue. So I'll just wrap up a little with Europe. Should I wrap up a little with Europe? Okay.
You should wrap up.
Okay. Well, I'll just say, I won't go into all of them, but I'll just tell you that in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Sweden, in Western countries, they are criminally prosecuting people who make comments, opinions on Islam, or say true comments. Bridget Bardot, an animal rights activist, fined 5 times for making comments like she doesn't like the ritual slaughter of sheep on Muslim holidays. So it's happening here. It's here now. And I'll wrap up by saying that I don't think people really understand the importance of free speech. It's a foundational freedom. It is not the same as all the other freedoms. Without it, you don't have religious freedom, national security, political dissent, or human rights. And it is a rare and precious thing. We live in a bubble. We assume that America is the way it is and it will be this way forever, but many countries that had freedom lost it. So I think we can't take it for granted. We have to be vigilant on these issues, and we can't surrender on the language inch by inch. And the last thing I'll say is, as the way Diana was referring to, it's not just about censorship. It's also about language manipulation, redefinition. So you really have to pay attention to what people are saying and why they're saying, and don't let them take it away, because we are the last bastion of freedom on this earth. We're the only country that has a First Amendment and true freedom, and we cannot give it up. Thank you.
Amen.